Okay, welcome to our on-camera video workshop. We'll talk about some various scenarios in which you might need to use good presentation skills to represent yourself in an on-camera fashion. We'll do video conference exercises and discussion. We'll talk about if you are called upon to do an on-camera interview, what's some sort of presentation skills you can use to reflect you or reflect your company in a positive fashion using very simple techniques. And we'll look at a press conference scenario. We'll ask the same question: how can we use the good on-camera techniques to present ourselves in a way that reflects us in a positive, professional manner? We'll go over just a few audio-visual basics: angles, lighting, sound. We'll talk about how you might approach a video conference. We'll talk about how you might approach an on-camera interview if that's something you're called upon to do professionally. And then we've got 3 exercises that you all prepared and hopefully should be fun and a great way to practice these concepts. So we'll start with a couple of basics. Sound. First thing I want to talk about, talking into a microphone. Has anyone ever noticed that when you talk into a microphone or when you hear someone talking to a microphone, sometimes initially there's just an abrupt, annoying sound, like a loud click or a loud sort of feedback type thing? One technique I want to share with you, or 2 techniques I want to share with you to prevent that. One is softening up your start by using what I call the H technique, which means if you say a word that starts with H, you'll notice that you let out a tiny little breath, a tiny little amount of breath when you say that word. If you say how, it starts with a slight breathy sound. If you say who, if you say Harold, there's just a little breath that comes out of your mouth. And you can use that little amount of breath to prevent a hard start on a microphone. You could actually say a word that starts with H, or alternatively, you could just think a word that starts with H in your head. And if you think that, it will let just a tiny little bit of breath out of your mouth and prevent that hard start on the microphone. So for example, if I'm going to say, but Rutgers Business School seeks this, I would just think the H and say, but Rutgers Business School. I think that H in my head, and it just lets a little breath out of my mouth. Does that make sense? Maybe you can try it when you get in front of a microphone. The other technique I want to mention on a microphone is what I call the increasing volume pull technique. So I recommend starting with the microphone a little bit farther away from your mouth if you haven't done a sound check. If you have time to do a sound check and know exactly where you need to put the microphone, fine. But if it's just a situation where folks are passing around a microphone, I recommend starting with the microphone just a little bit further away than you would expect, and just increase the volume as you pull the microphone towards you. So combination of those 2 techniques. Start with an H sound, or just think an H sound, and increase volume as you pull the microphone to you, and you hear what the appropriate level of volume is. Does that technique make sense? So 2 things. Start with an H sound, or think an H sound, and 2, pull the microphone to you as you adjust your level of volume. If you are not using a free-held microphone, if you're mic'd up, you just have to adjust. If you have a microphone sort of clipped on you, you have to adjust your volume, and you have to just pay extra attention to that. You can't use the movement technique. Last thing I want to say about using a microphone is you want to make sure that your mouth, your face, your eyes are visible when you're talking to an audience. They've done studies that when your mouth is covered, people can't hear you as effectively. They can't for whatever reason. They're not given visual cues, and that visual cue doesn't help. It helps them, would have helped them absorb the sound or understand the sound. And you're just not taken as seriously if someone can't see your mouth moving, and it doesn't help you with your presentation. So make sure you're not covering up your mouth, face, or eyes with a microphone. Second, voice. Slow, natural, engaged speaking voice. When you're doing a video conference, this is not the time you want to try out your presenter voice or your show, show host. What is that? Game show host. That's what I'm looking for. It's not the time to practice being a game show host. Just speak slowly, speak clearly, speak naturally. And I like to use the term just speak with an engaged voice. I rarely would tell someone to speak louder. I would just say speak more in a more engaged fashion. Just think about what you're saying, think about why it's exciting to you, think about how you can engage yourself in that speech more. Starting and stopping. So if you're starting and stopping with an interview microphone or a video conference, I would start with these two mic techniques I mentioned. The H sound, or increasing volume pull technique, as you pull the microphone closer to you. Full sentence minimum. Sometimes if you make very short statements over a video conference, there can be a little feedback at the beginning of that statement, at the end of that statement. And if you just say 3 words, it's like the first word was fuzzy, the middle word was sort of understandable, and then the last word was fuzzy. So a full statement minimum is often a good rule of thumb when you're speaking in this type of meeting. And clear stop. This is not a situation where you want to ramble on, especially if you're on a video conference where it might be hard to understand exactly what's going on in the scenario. So don't ramble, make a clear, definitive stop that the people on the other end of the line can tell that you're going to stop. Okay, a little basics on sound. Let's talk about eye contact. When you're working with a camera, there's always the question, do you make eye contact with the camera? Do you look into the camera? Or do you make eye contact with someone else? The studio audience, the audience that you're interacting with that the camera is capturing. And I would say it depends. Sometimes, if you want to connect directly with the people watching you on the camera, I would look straight into the camera. Other times, if you want to give the people watching on the camera the experience of being here, I would look at the studio audience. So in either case, you're conscious of the camera. You're conscious that the camera is either giving you the medium to communicate directly with the people by looking straight into the camera and talking to them, or you're conscious of the fact that the camera is watching you and you're giving them the feeling of what it would be like to be here hearing you speak in person. So, eye contact with the studio audience, this is the same concept if you're giving an interview. You make eye contact with the interviewer, and you're giving the audience that is watching on camera the understanding of what it would be like to be having an intimate conversation with you. But if you want to connect with the camera audience a little bit more directly, you can look straight into the camera. One thing I would say, if you decide to look into the camera, is commit to it. I noticed this a lot when I watched the Republican presidential debates, when sometimes the candidates would look into the camera for a second, and then they would look away, and then they would look back into the camera for a second, and it became unnerving to see them look into the camera and then twist their eyes away frequently like that. So if you decide that you're going to make a plea directly to the people watching, the American people in that case, look directly into the camera and be consistent with it. Now, it can be difficult. It can be unnerving to look directly into a camera and pretend that you're talking to people. Has anyone done that before or tried to do that before? Anyone ever done any on-camera work a little bit, Jen?
Yeah, like when you do video interviews or video conference, like it's just very bizarre.
Yeah, it's like you're looking into a machine, but at the same time, you're trying to create a personable, professional appearance, because that's what the people on the other end of the camera or the other end of the video conference are seeing. Technique I like is just imagine that that camera is a person. Just have to stop in your head and think a minute. All right, this is Sally in accounting I'm talking to, and she's in Cleveland. I know who she is, and I want her to understand whatever business concept I'm trying to explain. I want to answer her questions, And just think of this camera as a person. I've also heard actors use the technique, think of the camera as a pet. Think of the camera as your little dog or your little cat that you can pet, and something that makes you think of something friendly. And this camera is not really that intimidating. It's just a small camera. Imagine if this were a bigger camera and you had several people behind it working lights and doing all sorts of mechanical things. It would be hard. You just have to remind yourself, okay, there really is someone on the other end of that camera, and they care that I put a friendly face. They care that I represent myself in a way that helps them understand the business concept or whatever it is we're discussing. So I like that term. Think of the camera as a person or a pet. Okay, open the camera, commit fully. Okay. I want to go over a couple basics on lighting. And I hope after we have this 5-10 minute discussion on lighting, you realize that there are very simple tricks you can do to make yourself look better on camera with very simple lighting instruments, say a desk lamp or a window or the way you can shade it. Lighting is ultimately not that complicated. I'm going to teach you the basic 3-point lighting system. It involves 3 sources of light. There will be a key light, which will illuminate most of your features. A key light pointed at you from one direction is going to ultimately leave some shadows. You want to be conscious of that and think if you can get a different light pointing from a different direction to illuminate some of the shadows on your face. Thirdly, if possible, you want to think about using a backlight which will differentiate you from whatever is behind you. Differentiate you from the wall, suppose. So if I'm standing here, I've got a camera at me, maybe I'm going to try to find one source of light. Maybe it's going to come from this direction. It's going to illuminate me for the most part. But as that light shines on me, this part of my face is going to look shaded. And if I just leave it like that, the people at the other end of the video conference, the people in Seattle, are always going to remember me as the guy who had the weird shaded face. Hopefully I can get beyond that by giving them some good business advice or business discussion. But if I have another light handy, I could point it at me from a different direction and illuminate that. And then lastly, so I don't just blend in with the wall, I might shine a light on the wall and it would reflect back on me a little bit. Or I could just shine a light at my back or the back of my head and see how that works. Let me show you a quick example of this in action. All right, so example, we've got a guy sitting in a chair with no light, maybe just some overhead lights. All right, and the key, let me turn the lights off real quick so you can get a better sense of this. Okay, so no light. All right, and then we've got key light. We're starting to get an idea of this subject. We bring out more of the features, but of course, there's this shadow part of his face. So the light is coming from off here, and we've got shadows on this side of his face. So we want some sort of fill light. Maybe if he has an iPhone handy, you could shine the flashlight at him. Maybe if he has some sort of desk light, he could just shine that on that side of his face. All right, now we've got some key light illuminating this side of his face, and we're filling in those shadows from the other direction. And then lastly, we put some backlight. Either we shine some light on the wall behind him, or we shine some light at his back from the wall. And we see him stand out from the wall. Does that make sense? So 5 minutes later, you all have some skills to light yourselves. Maybe you thought this was very, very complicated art, but it really isn't. All right, a couple things to be aware of. This is an extreme example of not using good backlight when the subject just blends into the background. This is a really cool look if you're James Bond, but if you're Joe from accounting, you don't want to be this person, remembered as the guy who blended into the wall. So not only is this person using this actor using no backlight, but also we'll talk in a minute about wardrobe choice. Now we want to be conscious of this blending not happening. All right, we'll talk right now about attire, wardrobe choice. So if you find yourself getting ready for an interview, especially you want to be conscious of this. Also, if you have an important Skype call with a different department, you want to think about these things as well. Feel the part, feel comfortable. I say the two things when you're choosing your wardrobe. Think about what you're representing. All right, are you representing your company that sells life insurance? So think about how you want to represent yourself that way. But at the same time, try to wear clothes that make you feel comfortable. Because we'll talk in a moment about how you want to be yourself, and you want to feel sincere, and you want to feel confident in this interview. So wear clothes that allow you to feel comfortable, but also represent who you need to represent. Color contrast, a couple of notes. Solid colors, not dizzy patterns. Like this shirt I have on would probably be a little dizzy for the camera. In fact, maybe we can test it later. If the camera is right on me and I'm moving back and forth, it would probably make my audience dizzy. I know sometimes your favorite shirt, it has the stripes on, it fits the right way, you think, man, this is just going to really make me feel confident when I give that interview or do the video conference. But think about a shirt or wardrobe choice with solid colors that won't distract your audience. A couple examples of dizzy pattern. Patterns dancing. Dizzy pattern. Got it. Okay. There's one. All right, here's another one. We've got flannels, vertical stripes. As this guy turns around, it distracts our eye a little bit. I mean, maybe you'd like to see that guy in your kitchen, I don't know, but the dizziness, the distraction visually is a problem. Okay, so we've gone over some basics. We've gone over eye contact, we've gone over angles, we've gone over lighting. No, we haven't gone over angles. We've gone over lighting, so now we're going to go over angles. What I mean by angles is how we want the camera in relationship to us. It's like if you look at that camera that's recording this class right now, it's almost at eye level. And that's typically where we'll want it. We'll want the camera pointing at our eye level. We don't want it high looking down on us, and we don't want it low looking up on us, or giving the impression as if we're higher than the camera, higher than the audience. Vertical, all right? We typically want a 90-degree angle. There's some problems when we don't have a 90-degree angle. One I call a heavy top, the other I call a mischievous bottom. So a heavy top would mean camera that is low, it's looking up at us. It gives the kind of almighty type of picture of us. Gives an impression to our audience that we're somehow presenting ourselves in a way that's superior, perhaps. It also might be a very intimidating look. It also, when the camera is lower than you, it looks up your nose and just kind of freaks the audience out that way. The other problem is if the camera is too high and it's looking down on you, the way it hits your eyes, you can't see the whole features in your face, and you can't see the whole whites of your eyes, just makes you look mischievous, I think. I'll show a couple examples and see if you agree. It makes you look like you're hiding something. Potentially, it can make you look like you're a person who's not important, because it gives a feeling of submission when the camera is pointed down at you. Big foreground. What I mean by this, the space, the camera's here, I'm here. The space behind me is called the background. The space between me and the camera is called the foreground. And if I were to go up to the camera and move my hand like this, does anyone know what would happen?
It would blur.
Well, it would blur, but it would be like this huge hand coming right at the audience. This could be a problem if the camera is close to me. Maybe I'm here talking with another colleague and we're doing a Skype exercise of some sort, and I reach for something across the table, the people in Cleveland are like, oh my God, that big hand coming at us. And I'll show an example of this. All right, so it's almost like you're assaulting the camera when you're reaching close to it in the foreground. Blended participants, we want to think about how the camera blends everyone together if they're not separate visually. I'll show an example of that. All right, so let's look at some angle examples, and let's think about, do we like the angles and how do they represent the people in these pictures? And what might be going on in terms of a mistake if there's something distracting about it. All right, what's going on here? Picture taken by someone who probably didn't like Rick Santorum. Yeah.
It's a mix of assaulting the camera, doing the reach out foreground, and it's also positioned kind of facing up at him, so it makes it look like we're a little bit below.
Exactly. We've got the heavy top scenario. So we're looking up his nose. We're also looking at him like he's positioned himself in some sort of superior position. So it's a little bit intimidating and off-putting that way. And of course, he's just trying to shake hands with someone while the photographer just happens to be in the wrong place or the right place to make it look like he has a huge hand. Big foreground, heavy top. All right, how about this one? Look at just this part. We can talk about the poster in a minute, but just look at this part.
He's not positioned right. It's like he's almost like that, which is hard to hear in the background. It's just terrible.
Okay. So the angle is a little awkward, but there's something specific with the angle. It's one of those two. It's either low or high. And tell me which one it is, Al, and tell me what sort of effect it has on you as you look at this guy.
So yeah, so it's the angle of being low and up. It's also crooked. But yeah, so the effect is that he seems in a superior position.
Yes, exactly. Seems in a superior position. He's even got the lectern right in front of them. He's even got he's even dressed up, and he's got a huge picture of himself, like he thinks extremely highly of himself. Does anyone recognize this movie? This is a famous movie about a media tycoon who thought extremely highly of himself. So this was definitely a planned shot, the way the movie director did it, but it gives that impression that this person thinks he owns the world. And that's what the movie was about, but it's also good for us. We don't want to be the person who looks like we own the world when we're doing our video conferences. How about this one? I like this one. I'm going to turn the lights out for this one just a little bit. What's going on here? Look like they're up to no good. Yeah, what do you do if you see these two guys in your house? You call, you either call 911 or don't worry about it because it's already too late. So, all right, how did the person who took this picture create, at least in part, the illusion that they're up to no good and these are dangerous individuals? Because they're dressed in the same suits and the same hairstyle, but what did they do with the camera angle?
From the top.
Michelle?
It's from the top.
Yeah, it's from the top. We're looking down. We're not able to see their full eyes. So it looks a little weird. It looks like there's something shady going on there. And how about this one? Mike?
She looks terrified. We're looking down.
All right. She looks terrified. We're looking down. So that's a good point. So she looks terrified. Do you think she looks more terrified just because of the angle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you take a breath and look closely, she's probably not terrified. She's in fact just posing as an example of a high shot. So she looks terrified. In my mind, she looks submissive. She looks like the person you hire for maybe an admin role. She doesn't look like the person you might hire for director of operations, director of marketing, simply because of the camera angle. All right. And last one. We've got some angles. We've got some blended participants in this one. That's the reason I wanted to show you this. So here are 6 folks who perhaps are doing a video conference. So we've got, I don't know, Joe, the intern, off in the corner, who obviously isn't important and no one really listens to. This woman, Sally, I don't know, from accounting. For one reason or another, she's in between these two, which makes her look less important. We've got this guy standing up tall, and we've got this woman in the foreground. Both, I think, are interesting from the standpoint of, I wonder why. I wonder why is this guy standing up, and why is this woman so clear in the foreground? Are they the leaders of the team? Do they think they're the leaders of this team? Does this team have a leader? Do we know what's going on with these folks? So maybe I'm judging this team a little bit harshly just based on the picture, but that's the impression I get. Any thoughts or additional comments on that? Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, the gentleman in the back standing up, most of the time, teacher, student, teacher stand, and he's looking down at us, so we're kind of inferior, so that impression comes across.
Good point, good point. And especially because he's got the rest of the team sitting down, it's like, all right, here's the heavy top there. Good point. Okay, so we've gone over some basics, angles, sound, what else did we do? Angles, sound, lights. All right, so some basics that apply to all on-camera type of exercises. We're going to look now at some best practices on video conferencing, on-camera interviews, and press conferences. So, video conferencing. The first thing I want to address is eye contact. So, this happens most frequently in the video conferencing type of arena, as far as we're concerned. So if you're on a video conference with someone, and you're looking at them, say on your laptop or a company computer, and they're looking at you through a camera that's staring at you, what happens if you're looking at them is they look at a video of you looking at a screen. And you think you're making eye contact with them, but you're looking off in a different direction as far as they're concerned. So you're having a conversation with someone and both of you are looking off in different directions. Does anyone have any ideas how we could solve this problem?
So I know how we have our conference room set up is we'll have usually a table, and then the displays will be level with the table, and they actually put the camera right between both displays. So in order to see the participants, you have to look at the display, but you're also unconsciously looking directly at the camera to talk.
Okay, so it would be great if all setups looked like that, if all setups were like that, so that you're looking very close to the lens of the camera, at the same time you're looking at the participants. Al.
So I think when you're speaking, you look directly into the camera, and then when it's the other person's turn to speak, you can look at them looking into the camera, so as you're listening, you get the eye contact perception.
Okay, I would definitely recommend that. To the extent that you can, when you're speaking, look directly into the camera. And it's hard, because the camera, is that really a person? Does that person have feelings? Am I going to lose my train of thought when I'm looking into this black lens? Well, I would try it. I would try to do it as much as you can. Tonight we'll have some examples where, I guess we won't videotape the Skype calls, but hopefully you could have an opportunity at some point in your career to watch yourself on video, watch yourself on Skype, and think about the difference. Do you take yourself more seriously when you see yourself looking directly into the camera? And of course, you'll see other people so much more of the time. How seriously do you take someone when they're not making direct eye contact with you, compared to people on a video conference who have the skill to look directly into the camera and make you feel like they are talking directly to you, even though there's all this distance and there's this technological way that you're communicating. So I would recommend trying to look straight into the camera.
I was going to recommend too for more like one-on-one conferencing, like a Skype call or interview. Don't have anything distracting or anything that you can read. I've noticed a lot of interviewers sometimes, or people who are being interviewed, they'll have maybe their questions in front of them, and you can just see their eyes panning down the screen, and you know that they're, even though you're speaking at them,
Okay.
it just seems like they're distracted.
Yeah, and I've noticed newscasters do that on occasion as well. I mean, good newscasters who are talented don't let you see that, but some newscasters, you can actually see them reading the teleprompter as they're delivering the news to you. You're like, wait. My first thought when I noticed someone doing that is like, why can't I just read it myself? Why do I need you to read it to me? Question, Dan, or
Yeah,
comment?
we see that a lot when we get emails from the executive leadership. You can just constantly see their eyes rolling back and forth. And I'm just sitting there looking at their eyes and not really paying attention to even what they're saying.
Yeah.
It's that distracting. But
Yeah.
I notice like people who do it well are, blinking, always turning their head so that you can never really lock in to see if they're reading,
Yes.
even though they are.
Yeah, it would be the same thing. Someone gets up to give a presentation or give a speech to you, and then they just read something word to word for you. What is important then becomes this thing that they're reading. So why don't they just give you that sheet of paper and you can read it? Why do you need to listen to them? So at least think about absorbing it. Think about how you want to portray this to the audience who you are staring at right in this moment. And it's the same thing is true with the video conference. Even though you might be reading something, you want to think about how you care about the audience who is on the other end of that video conference and how it relates to them. Another option you can use, besides staring directly into the camera, is a distance plus zoom option. What I mean by that is, suppose this is my Skype camera, all right, and suppose Vishali is the monitor. Okay, so I see Vishali here, and I can talk to Vishali here. So if I'm this close, there's a big difference between Vishali and the camera. One thing I can do is I can get further away, and I can zoom the camera closer to me. So now there's a smaller angle between me and Vishali, or between the camera and Vishali. So when I have to look back and forth between them, it's not as big of a shift in my eyes. Does that make sense? Distance plus zoom option is a good technique. Hopefully you'll have a setup like Nick has, where the monitor and the camera are close together, and to the extent you can, look directly into the camera. And imagine that camera as an actual person. All right, video conference, understated body language. What I mean by that is often a video conference will cover a wide shot. So various facial expressions I make, various movements will not be as noticeable to the people on the other end of the camera as to the people who are in the room with me. And I've seen this a couple of times where everyone in the room who's on this video conference, they just all kind of look at each other like, no one really likes this idea, right? Yeah. And you can just see the nonverbal, no one really likes this idea. But it's not as apparent to the people on the other end of the video conference because of the understated body language. So for that reason, it's important to realize that and realize you need to communicate verbally or communicate clearly with whatever your feelings are if you don't like this project, or whatever the case may be. Time delays. Sometimes there can be a 1 second, 2 second time delay. This is another good reason to use a full sentence minimum when you talk, instead of just blurting out one word that will come as the people in the other location have already moved on to the next conference or the next topic. That happened to me one time. I was in Tampa, the other folks were in New York, And the folks in the woman leading the conference in New York said, all right, is everyone okay with that? Everyone agree with that proposal? And then I like hit the off mute button and I said, yes. And then I hit the mute button to put it back on. And then a couple seconds later, I hear everyone laughing. And I realized, or people told me what happened, is like there was just this delay. She had moved on to the next point. Everybody said yes. And then we hear this yes, this yes, just sort of coming through on the video. So, conscious of the time delays, use the full sentence minimum. Visual aids. So if you're trying to explain a graph, explain a map, right, explain something that your audience needs to understand, there's just additional obstacles. And we've got an exercise later today where we'll think about how you can bring a complicated visual something or another, visual aid, to life and not confuse your audience. But for now, I'll just say you need to be very careful about how you present that. Sometimes there's an option where you can actually click over to a graph and say, I'd like to draw your attention to this part of the graph, that part of the graph. Maybe you can move the mouse. Sometimes you can't, and I've seen people are tempted, because they can't, they're tempted to like hold up the graph and say here, this point here, that point here, and that often doesn't really work well. It's very important, I think, to just talk through the graph and say, I direct your attention to this point X, whatever, and just be very methodical about how you do that. Monotony and isolation. So, as folks in Cleveland are watching you on this video conference, as 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by, if it's just one person talking and then another person talking and then another person talking and the whole time you haven't reached out or connected with Cleveland, Cleveland might be falling asleep. I'm sure you all have experienced this. And this is an important project. If you're communicating important information, you want to try to break that up just for that reason. In addition to the fact that you want people to like coming to your meetings, or you want people to be enthusiastic about this project. So use opportunities to connect with the people on the other end. Say, you all in Cleveland, do you have any questions on that? All right, Sally, do you have questions on that? Joe, pick out individual people and say, can I get your feedback from you, from you, from you? Just to build that connection with people in different locations. Another thing you can do is change the camera angles from your location. So instead of just one shot of 5 people the whole time, and the 5 people just take turns talking, you could focus the camera on the speaker at one point, and then maybe pan the camera across to someone else, or zoom the camera out so you see a wider group of folks. And just that change can wake up the people at the other end of the conference to avoid that isolation, avoid people falling asleep and not hearing what you want them to hear. And for the same reason that visual aids can be confusing, people can feel isolated and fall asleep, and time delays, sometimes we can misinterpret signals. I recommend you be very clear with what you're trying to communicate in any type of video conference scenario. Use simple techniques like an agenda, like an overview system, preview. All right, here are the 5 things that we're going to talk about. Check in every now and then with a 30,000-foot view. So I realize we're in the details of this technical thing, but let's just take a step back and say this is the big picture of what we're talking about. This is the 30,000-foot view. When you get done talking about things, maybe you're going to do a quick review. So I realize those of you in Miami may have gotten a little lost, but let's just review. We talked about this and we decided this. These are, of course, great techniques you can use for any meeting, but sometimes they're much more important when you have this distance on a video conference. You add technical difficulties to the mix, and these type of simple concepts become even more important. All right, so that's video conferencing. Any comments on video conferencing? War stories on video conferencing? Anyone wants to share before we move on? Dan?
A lot of times with teleconferencing, the delays become that much more amplified, especially when we're coming to introduce whoever's on the call, for example.
Okay.
By the time you say hi or your name, you hear somebody, and then they hear you, and then everyone just stops.
Oh, okay, so, okay, got it. So everyone hears, it takes everyone a minute to hear you,
Yeah, so
to
like,
slow down?
if there's a conference call here and you and I.
Oh,
are
so
on
no
the
one
road,
talks, I know what you're saying.
You know, I'm introducing myself, and at the same time you're introducing yourself, we're both on the call on the road, and then once you start, I
Okay.
stop because I felt
Okay,
something
so there's like this 1-2 seconds of
Yeah.
multiple people talking and then everyone stops.
Yeah.
And then, okay,
I don't know
so,
if there's any way about that, but.
well, maybe an agenda or someone facilitating that, I think is the best way to handle that. Another way, if no one is taking charge and facilitating that, is just a clear start, full sentence minimum, don't stop. Be the one who keeps talking. And unless you get feedback that that's not working, or someone you feel like you come across as too aggressive, then you can correct that obviously, but just state your full sentence minimum and make a clear stop. Don't ramble on. Make people wonder whether you're stopping, make a clear stop. Yeah.
I'm going to mention one thing, also, kind of around the body language. A lot of people I know when they go or when they have a video conference, they almost treat it as a conference call, and when they forget at some point that people can see them, and they start feeling comfortable that it's them in the room,
Playing with
and
their
they
phone.
start, yeah. So it's, I've had people do that, or people in my group do that. You always want to make sure everyone's present.
Good. Good, great reminder. And I also might recommend changing camera angles in that type of situation. So when it's Bob's turn to talk, put the camera right on Bob. When it's, when you're transferring to someone else in a different location, they're talking, pan the camera out so you see now this is listening time. Yeah, great points. All right, so let's move on to on-camera interviews and some best practices to do that. Ways to represent yourself positively if you're called upon to explain something about your company, explain a new product launch. Maybe you're dealing with a difficult situation, explain how you've come through a difficult time or dealt with some sort of scandal. How can you positively represent yourself in that meeting? The first thing I want to mention is what I call the two-way, one-way conversation. This is something you'll encounter in an interview where essentially you, as an interviewee, you're having a two-way conversation with an interviewer. So the interviewer is asking you questions and you're having a two-way conversation. Just a normal conversation that we all have all the time. But the difference is, you're also having just a one-way conversation with the camera. The people watching at home are not seeing the second part of that conversation. You're just having a one-way conversation with them. So you need to be clear about what you're saying in that one-way conversation. And one way this plays out, as often interviewers will try to rile you up, try to ask you a difficult question, try to get some sort of reaction out of you. And if you react to that, then the audience at home, they don't see that the interviewer tried to rile you up. They just see you getting agitated. Because it's just a one-way conversation between you and the camera, or the audience watching via the camera. So you can use this to your advantage as well. If the interviewer asks you a difficult, threatening question, you can just act like they asked you a friendly question. Your friendly body language, your pleasant tone in responding to it, the one-way conversation with the camera, that's all that is seen. Is your positive reaction. Does that make sense? Noticed that Hillary Clinton does this especially well. She's often asked difficult questions. Questions like, how do you deal with the fact that no one trusts you? How do you deal with the fact that all young people hate you? How do you deal with the fact that you might be in prison for this email thing? And I've seen her answer those questions with a smile on her face and just a positive, open body language. So she's gotten a lot of practice at answering those types of questions and being friendly in response. Now, Donald Trump, on the other hand, is a different story. He reacts. Like if you ask him a nasty question, he'll give the interviewer a nasty answer back. But that's a whole other story about how that's working for him and why. So unless you're Donald Trump, I would say you want to respond positively to any type of hostile question because that's all the camera will see. All right, one-way, two-way conversation. Posture, sit up straight. What happens is the camera cannot see depth. So if I'm hunched, the camera really can't see that, you know, the back, my back is curved a little bit. It can't really read that I'm hunched over and slouched over. All it can see is that I'm squished down because it doesn't see the depth. And it looks even more like I have slouching posture if I don't sit up straight. So just sit up straight. Heard it 1,000 times, especially when you're on camera. Upright and forward, lack of depth perception that the camera doesn't see. Okay, overstated body language. Now I mentioned a minute ago with the video conference that there's understated body language. And I mentioned that because there's a wide shot. Typically the camera encompasses a large area, the shot encompasses a large area. So the audience watching this on camera cannot see the nuances of facial expressions the same way people in person can. But now, for an on-camera interview, I'm saying there's overstated body language. Does anyone know why? That's it. All right, the camera is typically closer on you. And especially if it's a situation where your reaction is important, people conducting the interview will get a close-up right on your face. So the audience can read that. The audience can read when you're upset. The audience can read if you're not being sincere. The audience sees you in a close-up moment. I mean, think about the times in your life when you have close-up conversations. Right? When you're so close to someone that they see you in the same way they would see you on an intimate interview. Right? They're 2 feet away from your face, or 1 foot away from your face. That's a pretty intimate space, right? And that's what an on-camera interview can create, that closeness with you. So people at home watching will see your reactions. And I like to say, be sincere at all times in your communications. But this is also a reminder that you want to think about what you can sincerely communicate, what you can be excited about communicating. You don't want to put yourself in the position where you're just saying the company line as if you're a robot that you don't really believe, because the camera can read that in a close-up shot. Actors call it truth times 10. Camera sees truth times 10. Close-up moments. Right? Think about how you have close-up moments with people in your real life. That's what you're seeing when you're watching someone on an interview. In terms of the camera angle, we talked about the vertical. You know, if this camera is going to be used to interview me, we want the camera at 90 degrees. We want the horizontal. I want the camera as close to dead on from the horizontal as possible. I don't want, if the camera's here, I don't want to be facing the interviewer here and just have a side profile of me. I want to be as close to looking directly into the camera as possible. So hopefully, if, say, Vishali is my interviewer, all right, this would be a good angle. I would be open to the camera, and it would see my full eyes, it would see my full face. I wouldn't see a side profile that makes me look shady. If suppose Mike is interviewing me, I'm getting a little bit of a side profile. If I have some control over that, I might say, hey, can we switch the camera? Or have my agent or have my PR person say, can we switch the camera? There's another thing I can do, which is a bit of an advanced technique. If Mike's interviewing me here, the camera's here, I can answer his questions and talk to him as if he is here. Like I can talk to Mike, just talk to an imaginary chair right there. The audience is not going to know, but they're going to see more of my face. It's an advanced technique that you want to practice beforehand, but it's possible. It's certainly usable. Does that make sense? Daniel?
If it doesn't matter to you that you're not making eye contact directly with Mike, why wouldn't you just look straight in the camera?
Okay, so remember that we make a choice. Do we want to look straight into the camera, or do we want to look make eye contact with the person that we're in the studio audience with. In an interview situation, we want to give the at-home audience the feeling of that intimate conversation we're having with the interviewer. So we want to create that for the audience. And we want to show our sincere selves. We want to be talking to someone as if we're having a friendly, intimate conversation. And we want the audience to have that impression. And I can create that. I'm glad you asked that, Daniel. I can create that. I don't have to be looking at Mike to create that. I can still give the audience that impression of what it would be like to be having a sincere, intimate conversation with me just by looking at an empty chair. Does that make sense?
This is when Mike is here in person interviewing you, and there's a camera there, and you're just not looking at him.
Right, right. All right, so Mike is here, the camera's here, I'm staring right here, and I'm giving the audience the impression of what it would be like to have an intimate conversation with me. So I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a weird concept, isn't it? It's similar to being on a Skype call with someone and trying to create that feeling of intimacy by looking directly into the camera. You're creating an illusion that you're looking into their eyes, but you're not actually looking into their eyes. But you're representing yourself in a way that's going to make them take you more seriously. Maybe make them think you are a more talented professional than you are just because you know a few basic techniques. Or maybe you're going to let them know how talented you are because you know how important those details are. We're creating an illusion to an extent. Does that make sense, Renee? All right, good. Glad you brought that up. Okay, so let's think about what we want to say in on-camera interviews. We don't want to just respond to whatever questions we are asked. I used to think this when I was a kid, when I was watching those late night shows with David Letterman and Jay Leno. I used to think like, oh, you know, he brings these people on the show and he just asks them questions. I wonder if I got on the show, I would just depend on what Jay Leno asked me, and I would just hope I had the right story based on his question. But that's not the way it works. When you come on for an interview, when you prepare for an interview, you have something that you want to say. You have your key messages, and oftentimes it doesn't matter what the interviewer asks you. You're going to say your key messages. You don't want to be at the whim of whatever someone asks you to determine how you represent your company. You've got your key things that you want to say, and you want to think about how those can be condensed down to meaningful sound bites. And then the next step is to think about what questions you're actually going to be asked. And think about how you can answer those with your key messages and your sound bites. Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State, famously once said, "Does anyone here have any questions for my answers?" So when he was answering questions from the White House press corps, didn't matter what they asked him, he would always say whatever he wanted to say. And he actually came right out and said it one time. Does anyone here have questions for my answers? And that is, of course, the way you want to approach the interview. You don't want your answers to depend on what someone just happens to ask you. You have a purpose for communicating. Think about that. Okay. Let's talk about a way to handle positive questions, and let's talk about a way to handle negative questions. If someone asks you a positive question, you can reiterate that question. Why not? All right, someone asks you, tell us how you've marketed this product so effectively. All right, so your question is why we've done such an excellent job of marketing this product. I would love to tell you that. Here's my key message, here's my sound bite. Alternatively, if someone asks you a negative question, you might not want to repeat that back, first of all. Similarly, you might want to try to steer that to a different direction and use what is called a blocking and bridging technique. Blocking, essentially, we're going to stop the momentum of the negative question and bridge that to something that we want to talk about. So if the company asks us, or the reporter asks us, well, give me a difficult question. Somebody give me a difficult question. See if, why Oh, okay, so
What
I
did she
see,
ask?
I'm sorry.
Did she ask?
She asked, why should I trust you? Okay. So I hear what you're saying. You're asking some questions about how we communicate. And I would love to tell you about how our company is communicating to build trust among the American people. Now, I'm not directly answering why you shouldn't trust me. I'm certainly not reiterating the question. So you're saying you have a lack of trust in me? Right? I just want to be clear, right? So we can move forward. I'm not going to reiterate the question that way. So, reiterate positive questions, blocking and bridging for negative questions. Okay. Any questions about on-camera interviews before we move on? Or comments? War stories? Dan?
When you talk about reiterating positive questions, it just sounds a little weird to just repeat exactly the same question we asked.
Okay, so a couple of ways I would suggest you handle that. You can shade it in a different nuance. So you ask me, tell us why you've had so much success in marketing. Say, all right, so the question was about the, it's a different way I could say that. The question was about how we've positively represented our different campaigns. That's your question, right? So let me tell you about that. We could just say it a little differently to keep it fresh, but also you might want to keep in mind that sometimes it's hard for the audience to hear the question that was asked. Like I said just a minute ago, Lavanya asked me a question, you're like, what question did you say? All right. So if it was a positive question, I want to reiterate it clearly. If it was a negative question, I can reiterate it, essentially, but by bridging it to something that I want to talk about.
I was going to say, for me personally, I did a video interview, and I'm not used to seeing myself on camera, and it was an interview where I'm not seeing the other person, but I'm seeing myself answer the questions. So I felt like that was pretty distracting because I'm trying to answer questions, and at the same time I'm noticing things that I've never really noticed about myself or how I use body language. So I would suggest maybe getting comfortable with seeing how you look in camera before
Yeah.
doing a video interview in case that's the situation.
Yes, it can be painful. We judge ourselves harshly, but that's a great point. You don't want the first time you're noticing weird things about how you look on camera to be in a very high stakes environment. So some practice is great. And forgive yourself when you twitch a little bit too much or whatever you're more critical of than your audience might be. Great point. Okay, so press conferences. You need to give a press conference. Suppose your company just spilled millions of gallons of oil in the Atlantic Ocean. You're going to give a press conference explaining what you're going to do about it. I suppose it's a positive situation. You just came out with a great product and you want to explain it. And you're able to generate some interest to get the press there to watch you make that announcement. I want to pose the question, why do we hold a press conference? And I want to tell you the answer I have in mind, and we'll discuss it, see if you agree. The reason you hold a press conference is because you have two things that you need to portray, or you need to show. One, you have a key message, and two, you have an important messaging. So if you just had a message that you wanted to portray, to get out, you could just send out a press release. You could mail it to or email it to the various news organizations. But the reason you might want to hold a press conference is you have a specific person who you want to portray that information. And that in and of itself is an important message. All right, if the CEO of the company comes to deliver this press conference, that's a signal that we're taking this issue very seriously, or we're very excited about this new development. And the characteristics of that person, their reputation, the way they've been known for the company or known, their association with the company, all plays into how their message is received. And if you are the person coordinating this press conference or deciding on this press conference, you may say, all right, well, let's say this key message that is important for our business, but let's very carefully think about who we need to present this message. So, press conference, key message is important, and in fact, the specific messenger is also something you want to think about. So, a press conference, you may read a prepared statement,